What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's episode we are going to check out the new Tonality WesBorland guitar plugin from STL Tones. So let's roll the demo and get right into it. Alright, that was the demo. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, because I certainly had a lot of fun with this, and I do think it's one of the better demo songs I've written, especially for something that was just for a video and not something I was already working on. So this was all new, no preconceived ideas or anything. I was just super stoked to get into it because, as you saw, I do have the Live Laugh Limp Bizkit tattoo. Safe to say I'm a fan. So you could probably tell I did try to stay within the Limp Bizkit realm, as it were, but put my own spin on the track a little bit. So obviously I was stoked to check out the plugin, and I'm really happy with the results. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But with that being said, let's dive into the computer. I'll go through the session that I recorded that in, go through all the presets and the different settings and effects I used, and just kind of how I put it all together, and we'll explore the plugin a little bit. Alright, so here we are in Logic Pro, and as you can see I've got quite a few guitar tracks going on here, and then just a single bass. And for drums we are using the Gecko Drums P5 kit, which is my favorite, and I've talked about it here on the channel before. And then as you can see down below in the mixers section, we are just using the STL Tones plugins, the WesBorland plugin of course, and then I've got a couple instances of Pro Q3 on them. But before we go any further, I do just want to point out that I am not in any way sponsored or affiliated with STL Tones. I just like their stuff, and I'm obviously a Limp Bizkit fan. So I wanted to check it out, grab the free trial. We'll dive into that a little more at the end, but back to the mixing. So as you can see, like I said, I am just a fan of STL Tones. On all the drums I have the STL Tones Control Hub plugin, as well as here on the bass. So it's just stuff I use. But let's dive into the guitars, which is what we're here for. Let us start just at the top with this clean intro. And we are using amp 1, and that leads us into talking about the plugin. Within here, you have 3 different amps. Amp 1, which is what we're using in this case, is a Roland Jazz Chorus. Amp 2, which is what we're using on the rhythms, is a VH4, and then amp 3, I do believe we're using, but we'll find out as we go through this, is a Zodiac 50 Mark II, which I am not very familiar with. And now I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the plugin itself. I'm going to assume if you're watching a video like this and channels like mine that you are familiar with guitar plugins, at least in general. And so they're all pretty similar. You've got your amp, input, output, a noise gate, and STL Tones does have what they call a smart input or a whatever level listener. So you would play along. I don't have the guitar with me, of course. And then depending on your pickups and whatever signal you're putting into the plugin, it will smartly or automatically adjust your input to whatever they consider an ideal level. So apparently this was getting boosted 5 dB. Like I said, then we have a noise gate, tuner, pretty standard, and stomp boxes. So this is before the amp. We have the mini filter, which is pretty cool, and that does come into play later, as well as the WesBorland Big Wez, which is a neat fuzz pedal, which also comes into effect later. And then the amplifier, this one in particular, you have 2 channels, and then a high and low gain option. And then we have the cabs, which is the part that I spent the most time tweaking across all the tones that I captured or created in this demo. And then one thing I want to point out here is I do have the low and high pass filters here on the cab section, but there is actually no general EQ in the plugin, which I do think is kind of unfortunate because I do like when plugins have EQs in them to kind of reduce the amount of plugins you need for things. But at the same time, it's obviously no big deal just to throw on an EQ afterwards, and then you usually are going to have greater control over just a preset, number of bands and things. So pro and con, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But with that being said, there are 6 cabinets in here, as well as a handful of microphones on each, so you have quite a diverse range of tones you can get out of these. And you can see here, I was playing with the angle and the distance and whatnot. So that is the cab section on this preset. We'll go through the rest of them. But moving along in the plugin, next we have effects. So you've got a delay, and then this chorus flanger, and then a digital delay, which also has a couple different modes on it. So you got tape, warm, warp, mod, oh, I missed one, RV, analog, and standard. So we're going to go back to tape. And then, of course, output and MIDI if you want to mess with that. But that being said, let's move right along. Underneath that intro, we have this Peach Fuzz track, which I just thought was a fun name. And this is what this part sounds like. Then, of course, we have another part here later on that we'll get to. But for this, it's just a swell. And for that, we are using amp 2. And this is based on a preset that I created, my heavy, which is what we're using on the rhythms, but this has some extra things added to it. For example, here we are using the fuzz, which is cool. I've got that not quite maxed out. And then amplifier, we're on channel 4. These are the settings. Cabinet, we're using this 2x12 with a 57 and 414. And I don't think nope, not using any of the effects. So that's what that sounds like here, but we'll get to that in a second. And then we dive right into the main part of the track and what would be, I guess you could call a chorus section. This is the part that repeats. So let's get into the rhythms. So for the rhythm tone, we are using, like I said, this My Heavy preset that I created, which is using channel 3. We are not using any of these pre-effects. So here in this cabinet section, we do have a 4x12 Vintage 30 and then a 4x12 E50, which I'm not super familiar with, but this is the combination I ended up on, and I think it sounds pretty good. We are doing a high pass 85, and then I'm actually low passing in Pro Q3, which we're doing right after this, about 8100, and then just a couple dips here or there. So we'll play this with and without real quick. So a couple things we're doing here. This section, just to kind of clean up some of that mud. Just kind of thin the guitars a little bit, and then over here, actually both of these are really kind of fizzy, which stood out to me quite a bit. Probably not a big deal, but bothered me just a touch. So with and without. So just kind of taming that high end a little bit, and then of course we do have the roll off up top. So that is the rhythm tone we're using throughout the track, and then here in this chorus section we do have what I labeled an overlay, which is pretty neat. Just kind of creates a more layered style and sounds like something Limp Bizkit would kind of do. So here we are using amp 1 again, and we are using the filter and the fuzz, and we are also using the digital delay, yes. And so that is just like the root notes of those chords. But the warp effect is what really brings that out and kind of makes it stand forward in that section, which is cool. And then another Pro Q3, just again kind of taming that high end. Play this with and without. And then moving right along, we've got this section that I panned the left rhythm and then this lead part to the right, which I thought was kind of a neat touch. You know, spread the soundscape a little bit. I went back and forth on this section a lot. I originally had this tone, which we'll get into in a minute, you know, one center, then I did a double track left and right using that, and then this lead was in the center. And I was like, you know, nothing's really standing out. It's just kind of, you know, what can I do to make this part more interesting? And so that's when it finally occurred to me just to not have a giant tone shift in the rhythm and keep that on the main track. And then, you know, just do one left and then pan this to the right. So you have the bass in the middle. And that is what I obviously ended up in. I thought that was the most kind of creative way to do it versus like the kind of standard, like just a little lead part. So that's where we ended up. And this lead part, real quick, I do have pan to the right here, and then later on this is actually panned back to the center for this part at the end that comes back around. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is what this sounds like. And here we are using amp 3, which is what? This Selmer Zodiac 50 Mark II. And that is, I believe, yes. So this was a preset that I then edited. So I don't remember exactly what this started at, but again, we are using the filter, then the fuzz, as well as the regular delay. And this is the cap section I ended up on, which is probably where I did most of the changes versus whatever the standard preset was. Like I said earlier, the cab section is definitely where I did the most tweaks as far as using any presets went. So that's this part. And then back into the rhythm, and then this, like I said, chorus part, and then we get to this next section, which is probably my favorite. I've always liked bridges, which I suppose is what I would call this section. And then it goes into more like a breakdown kind of section. And so here is where we have the most layers going on. We've got our main rhythms once again. And that's just playing that little thing. And then here is where we have another preset, which is the Zaxxon Cannon. I don't know what that is. Amp 1, and then this is, I believe, just exactly as it comes. I think I just loaded this up as is. Got the fuzz, Amp 1. This is the cab section, which again might... actually, you know what? This might not be the original cab section. But anyway... And then we are using this digital delay. I feel like I never say that correctly. And this is just doing some octaves up the center. So that tone is what I had originally been using back on this kind of verse section earlier for what became just the left rhythm. I was using that, and it just seemed like too much of a tonal shift too early in the song. Whereas here, adding it in as a layer, I thought felt better and made a lot more sense. And then, underneath all of that, we've got this little drony lead part. And then this is using my version of the crap back again. This is probably the same, if not basically the same, as the lead that I came up with. I don't remember exactly why I put these on 2 different tracks, but that's what I did. And that's what it sounds like. So all together again. And that takes us into this clean 2 section, which is using the Bust My Head Open with a Stratocaster, which is probably one of the best preset names I've seen in a plugin. And then no effects here, Amp 1, here's the cab section, and then we are using the, what is this on? Flanger, of the chorus flanger. And then that is going into a Pro Q3, which is just a little filter which is automated. So that's that. Thought it was kind of a nice segue. And that takes us to the Peach Fuzz section again, which is something I added in really late. It was actually the last thing I did. I had done this, like I said, breakdown E kind of section. And so some of my favorite Limp Bizkit songs, which if you're a fan, you might recognize some of the influence on this song. Really, the whole Results May Vary album is one of my favorites. So this is kind of taking a combined influence of Eat You Alive from that album and then Take a Look Around from Chocolate Starfish. It was unintentional, but I accidentally used a very similar chord progression from both of those songs. And this is what I came up with. But that being said, I had this kind of breakdown section, and then I was like, what can I do to make this hit harder? And then that's when it came back to me. I was like, oh, there's the fuzz in there. Let's go ahead and make this kind of like a chainsaw-y kind of tone. And so that's what I did, just to beef it up. So by itself again. So I'm really happy with that. I think this section came out pretty cool, and I had a lot of fun filming the demo video for it that you saw earlier. But running through this is the My Heavy preset once again on channel 4, and then we've got the fuzz 63%, and then tone maxed out, volume sustain. This is the cab section, which might be the same or slightly different. And then no effects. So it's really just cranking on that fuzz. So without the fuzz, for example, and then I do remember bringing up like the presence, the gain. I think pretty much everything is cranked up just a little bit compared to the rhythm. And then the bass is turned all the way down. And that goes into Pro Q3, which is just kind of rolling off a lot of that low end and then dipping the upper end just a little bit with this little tilt sort of filter. Just to kind of tame it so it doesn't stand out too much, but just adds to the tone. So we'll actually play this without the fuzz. So yeah, there's that. Like I said, that was probably my favorite part. And then just to round it out, we've got the chorus again, and then this panned lead that is now in the center. So there you have it. That was my demo song, and then a deep dive into the session, kind of the way I used the plugin and how it all came together, which I thought was really neat. And so let me know what you think. But as for my own thoughts, as you could see, I was doing the free trial. Now, I don't think I'm going to buy this one as much as I am a Limp Bizkit fan, and it was super fun. It just doesn't do enough differently that I can't do in other plugins for me to justify buying it. The intro price was $100. I believe the normal is going to be $150. And it's cool. It has a lot of neat stuff in it, but as a whole, it's just not different enough for me as someone who has a bunch of guitar plugins. Now, if you just wanted to jam along to Limp Bizkit songs and kind of get pretty close to the tones, which I did, it's very good for that. But the novelty of it versus the practicality of it in a setting where you're going to be trying to create a bunch of different tones and stuff, it's cool. But the VH4 you can get in other plugins. The other amps weren't really doing the job for me. So I do think this one's going to be a pass for me personally, as much as that kind of hurts my soul a little bit, but my wallet's happy. And, one of the other factors that comes into that is it's missing things that I think a lot of other plugins are starting to adopt now. For example, like I said, there's no EQ section, which is not a make or break sort of thing, but it is nice to include. And I'm really just surprised that they didn't. And then we also see, like, for example, the Neural DSP plugins are all being updated to the new X system, which includes a pitch shift function built into all the plugins across the board, which is not here. It just doesn't have anything that stands out to it. I have so many guitar plugins at this point, something's really got to stand out to make it worth it to spend the money on it, and this just isn't it for me. But maybe it is for you. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this something you're going to be buying, or at least going to check out the free trial? Which I definitely think you should. You get 10 days just to play around with it, check it out, maybe write something. But that's just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is this something you're going to buy, or at least check out the free trial, which I would highly recommend because it is cool, and maybe it'll fit your needs better than mine. For example, if you don't have a ton of guitar plugins yet, this could be a really interesting start because you do get a diverse range of tones. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.